Thank you, Ken, and thank you to the quarterback club. And hard to believe that this is the 5th time I've had the privilege to stand before many of you in here and kind of give you an idea of where we're going, what we're going to do, and specifically shine a light on the Prep Classic coming up at the tail end of this week. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce some guests who are traveling with me today. First and foremost, my son, Colin, is a baseball player playing at Delgado, playing for Coach, the historic 1,000+ win, now National Junior College Hall of Fame coach, Mr. Joe Sherman. So Colin's traveling with me today. Kate Adams, the Director of Communications and Media Relations, if you will. Many of you in the media know Kate and have an opportunity to work with her. Does a great job at keeping me from stepping in on occasion when it comes to doing stuff with the media. Mr. Eric Held is our new Director of the Coaches Association. Eric is one of your own right here in New Orleans, born and raised Louisianian, and has worked his way through the coaching ranks, and now was an incredible hire and doing a super job for us at the LHSAA and with the LHSAA. And then a local TV and radio celebrity from the Baton Rouge area, 104.5.9 ESPN Prep Weekly, as well as does a Saturday night show. Mr. Todd Black is here with us from ESPN in Baton Rouge. Before we get started, I'm not going to take much of your time. Ken said I could have 30 minutes. But I'm going to cut that to like 3 minutes if you know how it works. But I'll be available if anybody needs anything later. I think we're still open for some questions if we come to that. But coaches, first of all, on behalf of the LHSAA and the LHSAA, congratulations on your advancement to the state championship. What a grinding season, and the seasons that everybody had to get to where they were, whether it be to the quarterfinals, semifinals, or in this case now to the finals at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I'll address the elephant in the room from the get start of having the split of the split, for lack of better words. And I believe there's some misinformation. I want to try to get that straightened out today in regards to how we got to that point and how we are standing here today. First of all, for 38 years, the Prep Classic has been at the New Orleans Mercedes Superdome, and for a reason. And we were given an award 3 years ago as being one of the top 40 events that's held at the Mercedes Superdome. And I think that in itself speaks of the importance of participating there. There's no secret how I've spoken in regards to the importance of a venue, a national icon venue, of the opportunity to participate and step on that field, where a lot of the student athletes across the state, the only time they see that field is if they're watching it on TV and watching the New Orleans Saints play somebody at home. And I have said before, I will say it again, you can't put a price tag on the opportunity for somebody to get to play at the Mercedes Superdome. And having traveled the state, and I look at you, young man, in Franklinton, somewhere there's got to be something somewhere on your campus that talks about the road to the dome or participating in the dome or doing something like that. And for a group of athletes not to have that opportunity, it's unfortunate. But when the LHSAA name is thrown around, that the LHSAA did this or did that, I am guilty by association because I am the commissioner. I am the executive director of a great organization. But at the end of the day, we as the LHSAA, meaning my staff, and the staff has changed. Either people have retired or they've been fired. At the end of the day, we have a goal and we have a motivation to do what's best for every student in the state, regardless of where you go to school, regardless of the location of your school in this state. And every sport that we do this every day to make sure that the experience is one that a student athlete will remember, the experience is one that the student athlete's parents will remember, and the media will remember, and anybody, the fan base, the bands. It is all about that and giving them an opportunity. So when they look back, they know that they've had a great experience. And I think that's an important piece that, as a professional educator, that we try to do. And it's taking it as a principle. We want to try to make every day as a principal and a teacher. You can't have a bad day. We want that experience in your math class, in social studies, in any course subject, in any elective you have. We want to try to make that day a good day for you in that classroom. And nothing changes when you work with education-based athletics, as I do, as your executive director. But a year ago, in January, there are 93 private schools in the state association of 404. Of those 93, 77 of those schools play football. Of the 77 schools that play football, 66 were in that room that day, or chose to vote that day. Another 66, 44 of them voted not to participate in the Prep Classic. So when the LHSAA is accused of not allowing them to participate, or we split that, well, semantics is I am the LHSAA, and the principals make decisions. They're the ones that vote. We made it work. They made it work. But with that in mind, come this January, there's some important votes going to happen. Because standing here in front of you today, I will tell you this, that the association will not look like it looks right now, because survey results tell us that nobody likes to split when it comes to championships and splits and brackets that are just not conducive to success, and the costs that come incurred to schools that shouldn't even be in the playoffs. They're in the playoffs or hosting playoffs that don't want to host because they shouldn't be in there. We were ready to rectify that this last January, and it got off the rails to where we sit today, where there were athletes that didn't get the opportunity to participate in the iconic and nationwide view, especially with the NFHS network now, because like Ken said, we're going to be video streaming and televising every one of these doggone games starting at noon on Friday. Everybody can watch them, and everybody around the nation has the opportunity and will do so, and we get results from that. Colleagues of mine around the United States, we all watch each other's productions. So it's not just what we have here, but what we're able to give exposure to athletes across the nation as well. So when we talk about the Prep Classic, and we talk about the 100th year, starting in this next year, this next 2021, 100 years the LHSAA has been putting on state championships. 100 years, think about that. That's a long time, and we get the privilege, I get the privilege of being the executive director as we ring in the celebration of the 100th year. And nothing would satisfy myself, the executive committee who voted unanimously at the April and June meeting to allow myself and our staff to do everything we can to bring the association back to what it looks like before the first split for football only back in 2012 and 13. There have been 3 proposals submitted that will be at the annual convention, all of which bring the association back together. So when I stand before you and say it's going to look different than it does right now, that's how I can bank on the fact that it's going to do that. There would be some stipulations, but before we get there, one of the pieces I was challenged to do also was to ensure that the rules that we have in our handbook are fair, equitable, and can be enforced. And I don't think anybody in the media in here, and some of my colleagues, in fact, two of these guys over here know that for a fact, is that we have enforced the rules better than they've been enforced in a long time. Because it's important that we have them, but we want to make sure the rules are enforceable. And when you read them and I read them, we can come to the conclusion on the same, basically what that rule is trying to say. And right now, they're not written like that. So we're taking a book that's over 360 some odd pages and we're reducing it, and reduced it annually to the point where this year we are going to have it cleaned up. We went out, we hired a constitutional legal counsel, constitutional attorney, to pick our book apart and tell me where we can't defend, what we can defend, and how many conflicts we have, and all the changes we have to make. So for me to be able to ensure that we bring the organization back together, I have to ensure all of you sitting in this room and anybody listening and any tape that this is shown to anybody, that the rules that we have in the book are enforceable and everybody understands them. Because what happened is we kept making exceptions to the exceptions to the exceptions of a rule. And then the exception became the rule. And you can't always defend that exception. We need to cut back to where we all understand what the rules are. And as your executive director and the staff that I've assembled, we're going to enforce those rules, and we're going to do it equitably, and we're going to do it in a way that you know what you can do, when you can do it, and when you shouldn't do it. And there's no question on whether you need to get an attorney to fight because your interpretation is different than ours. My goal is if we want to do this and get it back and make it equitable, the rules should apply to everybody, whether you're a public school or a private school or a charter school or a public school that's got a magnet program, whatever it is, that you know what the rule is. So when the parent comes in and sits down with you and they're looking to make a move, or you're not living and playing where you live, that you know what the rule is. And there's no There's no way that anybody can sit here and, well, they should have known the rule. I know what the rule is, and that's where we're trying to go. Does that make sense to everybody? Kind of a rhetorical question. That's where we're going with this. And you know me, I've been here for 5 years. It's all about students for me. I was a principal, I've coached, and then you have to say those who can't coach become athletic directors. I become an athletic director. Those who are ADs that can't manage that become vice principals, and then you just kind of move through the system. But I had the opportunity on the education side to know what I'm talking about. And I have the abilities of having experience as an executive director before I came here. I know I'm not from here, meaning I'm not born and raised here, but my wife was born and raised right here in New Orleans. So I've been coming down here for a long time. But at the end of the day, please know that as your executive director, I know how to run a state association, we know how to do this, and we get input, and we're going in the right direction. We are going to get this train and this boat turned to where we know what everybody's doing, and doggone it, a year from now, when I'm standing up on this stage again, if I'm lucky enough, we're going to have everybody playing in the Superdome, and we're going to have classifications, and it doesn't matter no matter what school you're from or where you came from, there's going to be a know that when we get in that football field, that whether we're playing 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, or 5A, that we have the two best football teams at the end of the season playing one another, and we're scratching our head. And Ken Trahan, thank you very much, yes sir. So it's not about a public school, it's not about a private school, whether you do or you don't. At the end of the day, I truly believe that's the charge. Will this happen in January? I'm very optimistic. But you never know. I've been around the room long enough to know you never know what happens at that convention. But I'm going to do everything I can between now and January, the last Friday in January, to say exactly what I just said today. My message isn't going to change regardless of who I'm speaking in front of. It's going to be the same. And you just never know until the vote is cast. It kind of sounds like life, right? You just never know until that vote is cast. But I want to tell the coaches again, congratulations. I look nothing more forward to standing in the floor of the Superdome, on that fleur-de-lis, handing out the most outstanding player to this team, and the team that's crying. Everybody's crying out there. I don't know if you've been out there, but everybody's crying. The losers are crying, the winners are crying, everybody's crying. But it's all for different reasons. But until you see that on that field, I'm getting goosebumps right now. Standing out there, handing out those awards with the All-State Sugar Bowl and any other representative from the New Orleans Saints, handing out those awards and having those kids heist that trophy, whether the championship trophy, the runner-up, and they're getting those pictures taken, you can't beat it. You can't beat it. Just went through it in volleyball, just went through it in cross country, and now we're getting ready to crown some football championships. With that said, Ken, I think I've done my 5 minutes. Anybody have any questions for me?
Yes, sir. Over here, sir. I promised you that I would.
What are the odds that Ed Daniels is going to ask me a question?
Several. Go ahead, Ed. Several. Maybe a grilling. No, I'm just kidding. Or, Joe Namath guaranteed it. It doesn't sound like you can guarantee it, right? That it's going to be back together, right?
That's a great question, and no, I can't guarantee it, but I'm going to tell you this, as Broadway Joe said, I'm going to bust my butt to do the best I can representing all of you and all the kids of Louisiana when I get to the convention, that they will not have any questions about what they're voting about and where I stand on the issue.
6 classes, do you think that's a possibility?
There's a 6-class possibility, there's a 6-class proposal. Depends on who you talk to, but if you look at the overall dynamics and numbers, Ed, actually this state's not big enough for 5 classifications, including B and C in sports other than football. Could be 4. At one time, those of you old-timers in here, maybe these 3 guys that have already managed to break out a cold one this morning, maybe you, yeah, you 3 guys right there, good for you. I want to sit at that table. I'll take the jacket off. But no, when it was 4 classifications, so there's been a case where 404 schools, there are states that have less schools that have fewer, there are states that have more students in participation and have less classifications. And so, but yes, it's a possibility because it is one of the proposals.
Could you briefly explain how that would work, sir?
Which part?
Who would be in 6A? How would that work?
Basically what it does is it takes 1A, B, and C and combines it into 1. So there's always been numerous proposals about B and C which don't have football, but some of those schools have a population larger than some of the 1A schools that have chosen to play football. That's the difference, the distinction between the 1A and B and C, as you know, is those football schools are 1A. So it would be a combination of B and C, which would basically become the 1A. The 1A becomes 2A, the 3A, domino effect, it gets to the 6A. So presently the 5A would end up being the 6A.
So One other question, please. In the vast amount of time that you've now spent here, fifth time here, how much do you think this entire thing has hurt high school sports in Louisiana?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is obvious. This past weekend when individuals didn't get to participate in the Prep Classic, and Ms. Kate Adams interviewed student athletes, we did a survey, Ed, and that survey, 98.7, I believe, almost 99% of the students that surveyed talked about bringing the organization back together and didn't understand why, because a lot of those student athletes now, at the time of the split, were in 4th and 5th, 6th grade. They have no idea why we are where. The only what they know is what people have told them. And number two, that about the Superdome, that they felt that that was something that should participate there. So I wouldn't use the word hurt, but I will say is that as an old athlete, you know, you can play hurt, and, but you can't play if you're injured. And I truly believe at this point the LHSAA, including the playoff streak we have now, has played hurt. We're not completely injured, and we have an opportunity to rehabilitate. Mr. Bonine, over here. Yeah. Thank you for your stance, because that's what the public really wants. I mean, I'm a football official, but I don't have a kid. I don't. But even talking to other people that don't have anything to do with football or any other sports, they're saying it's crazy that we're split. So, and if you remember, we were the model program with our PowerPoint rankings and all that kind of stuff that other states came to look to us when we were all 5 classes all together. And I'm glad you brought up that poll y'all did about the students. Even the students want to get back together. So if you can use those 2 facts, that we were a model program before the split, and plus the students want to get together, I mean, I can't see why the principals don't see that. And there's been so many things that have changed over time, whether it be a private school, public school. How many educational options are they across the board now for everybody? Students can go to different schools. They can go to school outside their attendance zone. There's a lot of different ways, but you talk about metropolitan schools with the ability to move around, but you also have communities in Washington Parish and other parishes around the state that you really don't have an ability to move anywhere else. That's where your family lives. That's what you do, and that's where we have some schools that are there that are playing in this classic that they're built in the community right there, which gives a whole another meaning to that solidity of the community and the community-based school and what they have to do, which was the rub back in the day, where you've got schools that are in the metropolitan area that have put a cap on how many students they can have on the private side, yet they can pull from 100,000, 200,000 potential families, where if you live in the same community that's in the same classification that's not in the metropolitan area, then they can only pull from the 42,000 people they have in their community. So all of that stuff has been taken into consideration. Hence why I stated that whatever's passed, Ed, I look at you, is with the stipulations, the multipliers, and things we're going to do to try to do what we can to make it as equitable as possible. Because really there's not a lot you can do when you got a school that's junior classification because of school enrollment, but they sit smack dab in the middle of a city where they can get a lot of students to come in outside their attendance zones, which by the way is something we've done to get everything more equitable. We've established attendance zones in every parish in the state. They were there once and they went away, and now the board, us, have put it back in place. So now everybody knows where they're supposed to play, and that goes back to the rules that we have to make sure that we clean those up as well.
What was the objection of the select schools, why they don't want to come back together when you had a convention last year? Why did 66 schools said they don't want to play again? Maybe I misunderstood you.
No, you'd probably have to ask one of them, but here's going to give you Eddie's version of that. It came down to revenue. I was told point blank, in the year of the flood was the same year that we went from paying a dollar amount for the Superdome to a dollar amount for the Superdome. And the way the policy is written, once all the bills are paid, then we give guaranteed monies to the schools at a certain dollar amount, if it's there. That year we came up short. Two of the 18 schools that participated in that 2016 Prep Classic complained. 2 of those schools are some of the ones that voted to go out on their own. Last year, budget-wise, nobody knows this until today, I repaid all those schools. Anybody that came up short that year, we have since repaid them. The 3,000 they were owed, or the 4,000, whatever that balance was, didn't have to do that. But our board felt it was important in good faith to say, hey, we absorbed the cost, here it is now. And then schools have gone out. So whatever, once the dust settles in 1A, 2A, and 3A that just played outside the Superdome, and I'm going to close on this, Ed, okay? Or Ken? See, Ed, you got me all. Ken, is whatever that dollar amount is, when they go to split and the percentages and all the stuff divided up, whatever that dollar amount is they both made, that's the price tag they put on the experience for kids coming to the Superdome, in my opinion. Division 4, from the get-go, Ouachita Christian, Catholic Point Capee, over 13,000 views of when Ouachita Christian announced that they were going to the Superdome. You know why we, an executive committee, chose to do so? Number one, they were in the division that didn't vote 100%, but they had the majority that wanted to come to the Superdome. Those two schools since January have voted against the split of the split. They didn't like the split. They voted again in April. They did the survey the same way, and at the end of the day, we had a time slot. Once we met, we knew we could squeeze one game if we needed to. They put in a request. I proposed it to the executive committee unanimously. 22-0 voted, let them play. And guess what? Ouachita Christian and Catholic Point Capee will kick off at noon on Friday, and they're ready to go. And it did wonders for the community. That's doing stuff for the best interest of student athletes and kids. Kid Trahan, thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time today.